Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have about 25 people, Melanie, and more joining us. So lots of folks here today to get some great information. And just really quickly want to thank you all for being here. I'm Lisa Levine with Dementia Alliance of North Carolina. And we are doing part 2 of a 3-part Caring with Melanie series today. And then we are talking about different stages of dementia. So we are on the middle or moderate stages today. If you would like to find the chat box at the bottom of your screen and type in there where you are watching from, we would love to know that. And we are going to ask everyone to stay muted unless Melanie asks us to unmute. And we did want to thank our amazing sponsors for today. We have ESI, Aware Senior Care, and Capital Financial Solutions. And we couldn't do this without our sponsors, so we really want to thank them for joining us. And I am going to turn our session over to Miss Melanie Bunn, nurse and dementia trainer extraordinaire. Also good friend who I love seeing you in front of that pretty window, even if it is overcast. So thank you so much for joining us again, Melanie. We learned so much last time, had a lot of great questions during and after, and I know we're going to get more education today. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Lisa, and stay around because I might want to mess with you some. So
I'll be here.
Yay, thank you for that. I'm going to ask people to, yes, it's great if you leave the sound off unless you want to ask me something or talk to me, but I really love to see your faces. So I'm going to ask if you'll turn your video on because that helps me know who I'm talking with and helps me know if I'm kind of getting things right or if people are getting kind of confused and, oh, that's not what I thought you said last time. And it just kind of helps me. So I'm going to ask if people will turn their video on. So thank you for those of you who are doing that. I'm also going to mention if your video is off, I tend to think that you're naked. And that can be really distracting, or you're doing something you ought not to be doing. And that can really distract me. And I know sometimes people, their videos don't work, but it really does make it much more fun if I can see you, if we can really feel more like we're together. So I love seeing the faces of the people that I'm seeing. So thank you for being willing and able to do that. So thanks to those of y'all who did that. So let's start talking about this idea of what kind of happens in the middle. So we talked about the beginning when we had our first meeting, and some of y'all were here, and we're going to talk about the end, but there's this time in between, which is where we have a lot of challenges. And I use the word challenge, and Pat kind of said, oh, it's a little more than that. It's a little different than that. And it is. But I think that we as people who are connected to people living with dementia, who especially if we have known them for a long time, if they're people close to our heart, it's hard to find a way to both let go of the way things used to be and build these new connections and these new relationships and these new way of understanding with the person that we've got now. So that's kind of what we're going to try to do, is think about how can we let go of some things and still really hold on tight to some things that might be worth holding on to and valuable and meaningful. So we start to think about the changes that are kind of in the middle. We're thinking about things that are not like an on-off switch. It's not like she could do it yesterday and she can't do it today, but it's really more like a changing. And we tend to notice, particularly with Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia and the one that we know most about. So I appreciate people. There are 3 people who dropped, they are not naked. They aren't able to turn their cameras on. So thank you for that. I appreciate you knowing that. And Jody is eating lunch, so she doesn't want us to be jealous of what she's eating. But she's gonna eat fast, and she's gonna turn her camera on in a minute. So let's start that with the idea of eating, because we're going to use that as an example of how people kind of move through this changing and moving from being able to do complicated things down to the point where they can still do simple things. So let's kind of start there. So when my little boy, Lisa mentioned that I mentioned I had a little boy, and she said he turned out pretty good, and I think that's true as well. When I had a little boy and he was learning to eat, what were his first tools that he used as he was learning to eat? And you can drop it into the chat, or you can unmute and say it out loud. What were his first tools? And I see some of you doing it with me. And Holly dropped into the chat, his fingers and his hands were his first tools. Was he very good at using them? To be really honest, he stunk. I mean, he was not a fine motor kid. He was lousy using those fingers. But was I excited and joyful? I was excited and joyful because he was learning to feed himself, learning to help himself get nutrition. Was the little dog also excited and joyful? She was delighted. She was excited and joyful because the little dog, there Cheerios all over the place, not for long because the little dog loved Cheerios. He developed more skill. His brain matured. Things started connecting within his brain. His brain matured, and he moved to being able to do things with a tool. So how many of y'all have a toilet bowl brush on your desk and a hairbrush on your desk? We're going to talk about that in a minute. He started to use a spoon. Was he very good with his spoon and his yogurt? He was terrible with his spoon. Jody is shaking her head. He was terrible with his spoon and his yogurt. He was awful with his spoon and his yogurt. Was I still really thrilled and excited? Yes, I was a mother for the first time at 40 years old. Everything is a gift. The little dog, still really excited. He got more skills, and he moved into the point that now when we go to dinner, he can use a fork and a spoon and a knife. He can use a cup without a straw. He can have a conversation at the same time. He mostly knows how to use a napkin, and he mostly chews with his lips together. Yay, we're celebrating success. So he's able to move from simple to complicated. And it wasn't an on-off switch. So when we begin to think about the changes that happen with dementia, people move from the ability to do really complicated things like you eat. So if I'm thinking about all of the things, so drop in the chat, if you were to have a meal in a nice restaurant, what are all of the things that are going to be just part of right near you at the table? What are some of the things that are going to be there? And just drop them into the chat. What are some of the things that are there on the table that belong to you or maybe belong to the table? What are some of the things that are around? Just drop it in the chat. Okay, so I see utensils. So you've got spoon and forks and knives and maybe an extra spoon and maybe a salad spoon. And you've got salt and pepper shaker and plates and a glass of water and maybe a coffee and maybe the tablecloth and glasses, and somebody put down a menu, maybe candles and flowers. It's a much nicer place than I tend to eat, a centerpiece, those kinds of things. So when I've got dementia, and I'm starting to struggle with some of these complex things, I might can do the simple things, but all of these complex things become too much and too busy. So put up 5 fingers and put up 3 fingers. So in this situation, the problem is my environment needs what? Has 5 fingers, has 5 things I've got to manage and manipulate. What are my skills as a person living with dementia? I've only got this much skills. I've got this much need, this much skill, and now we're not going to be able to line things up. So does that mean, put your fingers back up, 5 fingers, 3 fingers. Does that mean we need to take away everything? What do we need to do? We need to find a way to match. So we need to have the expectations be 3, the skills be 3, and we find that way to match. So with something like eating, what we might need to match might be, Susan put in there, simplify. Susan, you're unmuted. Can you talk to me for a minute? So Susan, can you talk to me for a minute? You're unmuted. Might be having a bit of a sound issue. So I also see Stephanie is unmuted. Stephanie, can you talk to me for a minute? I feel like people can't hear me. I don't want to bother Jody because Bridget, can you unmute for a minute?
I can give an example.
Give me an example, Pat. I would love to hear an
As
example.
my husband's dementia increased, we only went to Chinese Asian restaurants. They knew he wanted one thing because I think he couldn't remember the other things on the menu. So it was always General Tso's chicken. They made it faster and quicker than regular restaurants. It was served and they knew him. So when he walked in the door, so our life got simple. I did not take, even at Carolina Meadows, so he was too restless waiting for the meal to be served to use the restaurant here.
Okay, so that's a great point because we were talking about the physical setup. Oops, lots of feedback there. We were talking about the physical setup of the table and the place setting, but Pat brought in something else, which was waiting. How many of y'all like to wait? Show me thumbs up if you like to wait. Show me thumbs down if you don't like to wait. I'm thinking if I could see everybody's thumbs, don't like to wait. Do you think that gets better or worse with dementia? It gets a lot worse. So part of what Pat did to simplify, drop into the chat some of the things that Pat identified that she did to simplify. What does she do to simplify? She used a familiar environment. So somewhere where they knew him and he knew them. So she went to one place. They knew what he liked to eat. She communicated, or they knew because they figured it out. They were attentive and paying attention. They figured out that he can't wait. He ordered the same thing every time. And it's kind of a complicated thing, but because it was a familiar, complicated thing, he was able to manage it. So that made it really successful. I saw Holly put up there, take away some of those extra pieces. So maybe what I might do to help that person be more successful is I might take away some of the extra spoons and forks and knives. I might take away more than one thing to drink. I might make it merely simple down to the point that just like with I might not have a whole plate. I might have a bowl and a utensil. And so we're doing one thing at a time. So I want to simplify, but I don't want to babyfy. So I'm taking a 3 and I'm taking 3 and I'm matching it together. So what Pat did in her situation, she made some changes in the environment. She made some changes in offering one choice, which was a yes or no choice, but the choice that she knew was going to get a yes, and made so it matched up really nicely. So that's a great way of simplifying and using preserved skills. So beautiful example. So also another thing that starts to happen in this kind of middle range is we start to simplify the environment. We start to simplify the choices. Things are changing that sometimes we don't notice as much. And one of the things that changes is the way we process information. So if you look at these 3 things, these are 3 things. And where are all 3 of these things found? In the bathroom. People are dropping in the chat. All 3 of these things are found in the bathroom. What is similar about all 3 of these things? They all have a brush your bristles. They all have a handle, and they're all brush things. They're all found in the bathroom. So if I've got dementia, one of the things that happens is a condition called agnosia, and it means I don't know what to do with things. So I look at all three of these things and I need to do something and I need a tool. So what I do is I choose a tool that's got a handle and it's got bristles. And I use my tool to do my task. Okay, so what is your immediate reaction to me combing my hair with a toilet bowl brush? Gross. Ooh. And Jody said, I hope you're yuck. I hope it's not a use. I can promise you I got this really, really cheap and it has never even been in my bathroom. It's always been on my desk. And that's a good thing about cheap things is I can have it here. So your first thing is to say, gross, that's disgusting. Agnosia. And Lisa can probably Google it and write it in the chat. It's called agnosia. So this is not what you would do with this. So what do you want to do? I'm going to ask Holly if she'll unmute for a minute. So Holly, how do you spend most time with people living with dementia or helping most people who are working with people living with dementia? What do you do? It does make my hair shiny though. Isn't it weird? Look how shiny this side looks compared to this side. I mean, it really does make my hair shine. So I don't think it's good for it because it keeps pulling it out, but it really does. Oops, there it went. So Holly, what kind of work do you do? Tell me what kind of work you do. Oops, I can't hear Holly. Can anybody hear Holly? Is it just me? We can't hear you, Holly. I'm feeling kind of I can't hear you yet.
She's unmuted now.
She's unmuted, but I can't hear when she's unmuted. Alrighty. I can't hear you. It's weird. Okay. Well, we know you tried. So I'm going to ask Jody to unmute. Jody, can you unmute for me a minute?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So what is your reflexive, not your skilled reaction? What is your reflexive reaction when you see me brushing my hair with a toilet roll brush? What do you automatically want to reach out and do?
I want to reach out and take it away as I'm gasping.
So Jody is going to gasp and then she's going to grab. She's going to gasp and then she's going to grab. So when Jody gasps and then she grabs, what am I going to do? Jody, what do you think is going to happen when you gasp and grab?
You're going to hold on even tighter. But can I back up? Because maybe what I would have done if I had seen my mother do that, I would have tried. My mother had a great sense of humor, even more so, is to joke with her and then maybe ask her. I would have maybe tried to put the brush out as a possibility and ask her if she could grab that one equally well or something.
Yeah, so Mom, you've got a great grip on that one.
Yeah.
Hey, Mom, look at this one. And so what Jody is doing is a skill and it's substitution, not subtraction. So it kind of sounds like a song, substitution, not subtraction, substitution, not subtraction. So you want to substitute instead of subtracting, because the more Jody grabs and the harder she tries to get this away from me, the harder I'm going to hold on to it and the more I'm going to want it. But if she offers me something that actually is kind of cute, you know, it's silver and it's not just plain old white, this might actually be more interesting and she can trade with me. So once Jody gets this in her hot little hand, where does she want to put it?
Somewhere outside of the bathroom area to limit possibilities.
Yeah, somewhere where I can't see it, because if I walk into my bathroom and I see a brush, what am I likely to do with this one?
Brush your hair.
Reach out, and this one does actually feel better, but now I've got to brush something else.
Your teeth.
Yeah, so what are you going to do? Are you going to grab this or are you going to
Substitute?
Substitute, not subtract. So this is one of the real challenges is we have this idea that everything is about memory. And anything that's not specifically memory is a choice. But the reality is, do this with me. Dementia impacts everything in your brain, everything that your brain does. And so all of your functions are related to dementia, all of those changes related to dementia. So what happens is that part of my brain doesn't track anymore. So people start to lose from simple to complex. People start to change from being able to really know specifically how to use a tool correctly to not knowing how to use that tool correctly. And it can create a lot of changes in how we interact with people. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint, and Lisa will be sending this to you. Maybe we'll even throw that word in there, agnosia, in there, and put that in there. Even though I didn't have it in there. That's why we don't send it out ahead of time, because we never know where we're going to wind up being. So you're noticing changes. You're noticing changes from simple from complex to simple, ability to do things. But people still have preserved strength. And that's part of the challenge, is we think so much about those losses, those struggles with things that are new, those struggles with things that are different, those struggles that things that we invest in and we investigate because it's supposed to make life easier. So we get a new shower curtain because it's supposed to be easier than the ones that and it doesn't work out to be easier. Even if it's supposed to be easier to slide, it doesn't work out. So when we change our focus to familiar tools, to familiar routines, to the way things used to be. So that might involve thinking about some things that make the world make sense. So I had a man who was in this middle part, in this moderate part of dementia, and he walked up to me and he said, hey baby, hey baby, hey, listen, now shut up, now listen. Now you better be careful around here. And I said, oh, I better be careful. And he said, you better be careful around here, because you walk in some of these closets and they'll pour water on your head. Now, what was he talking about? Drop it in the chat or unmute if you think you know what we're talking about. When you walk in some of these closets and they'll pour water on your head. A shower. That's what he was talking about. But that was really, so when they tried to give him a shower, when they helped him get cleaned up, was that a positive experience for him or a really scary negative experience? It was a really scary negative experience. I had another lady, we had a big Whirlpool tub, and she was in the big Whirlpool tub, and she says, sweetheart, would you please finish boiling me? Because she felt like with all the bubbles and all the water that she was being boiled. So some of these things we do to try to make things easier actually wind up making things more complicated, because simpler is simpler. So let me ask you a question. How clean can people get standing in front of the sink with a washcloth and some soap? Can people get pretty clean that way? Who's going to get cleaner? Somebody who's safe and comfortable standing in front of us, kind of going up under their clothes. So some of the things we try to make things simple actually make things a lot more complicated. So I'm going to pause for a minute. And I love that Holly said with her experience and the education that she's done, she's sharing with people that you can get just as clean with a bath in front of the sink as you can get being dunked or sprinkled. It just really depends. So I'm going to pause for a minute, because I think I saw, it was Jody who said that she had a question. Jody, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. And I ask it confusingly. I also have vast experience working with pre-K, and K, and people with who are learning their skills.
Mhm.
And my experience with both of my parents is that their skills faded. One of the things that I learned in one of my trainings of working with younger ones is to kind of sing songs. And like, you know, I'm sure like if, and they're called earworms. So like those of us who could be my age know about the Oscar Mayer Wiener song, and you could probably redo it right now and know that. So I'm wondering if working with, right, yes, I see you're doing it perfectly, that if someone were in a situation where, you know, maybe all of the brushes hadn't been removed, that if you constantly sang the same song, like brush, brush, brush your teeth with the pink brush, and you know, I'm tone deaf, but I mean, then that is also like another way to laugh with the person. But then I was thinking that when I was working, when I was with my dad, I'd have to do stuff like 8 zillion times. But if we were always singing the same, let's brush your teeth with the pink brush, that maybe there would be an alignment made that way, or am I simply complicating life as I have a tendency to do?
Yeah, well, I think there's some real thing. And I think, you know, music is a way to make connections, and music is a way to get people's attention and to store new memories and store new information. The music rhythmical side of the brain stays more connected and engaged than the formal language side of the brain. So let me give you an example. I have a lady I worked with fairly recently, and she was in a situation where people were feeding her. And I had a sense that that might not be necessary based on some other things I saw her do with her hands and some other ways I saw her moving. I thought she could probably feed herself. So what I did was I started out with helping her eat using something called, and I wasn't planning to get into this today. I was planning to get into this next time, but you never know what we might get into any day or anytime. So what I actually started doing with her was using a technique called hand under hand. So give me a second, I'm gonna grab my glove. So what I actually did with her is I actually would put the tool, this is her hand, this is my hand. I would actually put the tool in my hand and actually use the tool to help her eat. Well, after a while, she started having opinions. So then I put the tool in her hand and just gave her a little bit of guidance, and she was able to eat. So she actually, with that kind of approach, and I would do some things, we would have conversations that were kind of repetitive while she was doing it. She really loved the chocolate milkshake that she had. That was like the best part of the day, was the chocolate milkshake. So between the efforts of trying to use tools and having food and having me there, which do you think she preferred, the chocolate milkshake or the food?
Milkshake.
She preferred the chocolate milkshake. So what she would do is she would pick up the chocolate milkshake and she would drink the chocolate milkshake. And she was really, really tiny. So once she got the chocolate milkshake in her stomach, what was she then interested in? She was done. So what I started doing with her is I would try to get her to put the milkshake down. Was she very interested in putting the milkshake down? Not interested in putting the milkshake down. So what I started doing with her is I would go, she would start drinking and I would go 3, 2, 1, and done. And we put the milkshake down. So she got really used to that 3, 2, 1, and done. And so that rhythm was able to her when she got to the point when I would say done, she would put the milkshake down. I didn't have to trigger it. So she got that muscle memory kind of back in. She eventually got to the point where she can now feed herself. She still would drink the whole milkshake. I've still got to monitor that for her, or the people working with her still have to monitor that part. But she was able to become so much more independent and so much more So if you left the milkshake for dessert, the problem is I could use the milkshake to kind of get her to eat and drink some other things. So I could use the milkshake, more milkshake. So let's have this, 2, 3, and now you can have the milkshake. 3, 2, 1, and done. And just a helpful hint, I always count down. I did this with my son as well. I always count down instead of up. So you see a lot of people going 1, 2, 3, go. What's the problem with 1, 2, 3? What comes after 1, 2, 3? 4, 5, 6. What comes after 4, 5, 6? 7, 8, 9. So you can count up forever. And so I always count backwards because people know when you get to 1, you're done. And it kind of rhymes. So I'll do 3, 2, 1, and up when I'm working. So I use a lot of rhythm. I use a lot of that pattern, but I always count down. So great. Did I answer your question, Jody? Sort of, yeah. Cool. Any other questions before we keep moving?
I'd like to say something about the shower.
Please, yes, Pat.
My husband was fastidious, but he went to memory care in the first year, no trouble, he showered. And we had a party once a month. And so sometimes because the CNAs would be busy, I would help him shower. Fine. So one Wednesday or whatever the party was, I gave him the washcloth and the soapless soap or whatever Carolina Meadows used.
The rinseless soap.
Yeah. And so I watched him under his arms and very careful about his private parts. He wasn't circumcised, so he had been trained by his mom probably to be fastidious about private parts. 3 weeks later, he shoves me, won't get in the shower, turned it off. So some CNA must have been over scrupulous. It's the only thing I can figure out. And most of the CNAs were women. And I did try to get a man to come in and shower the men that were there, but I wasn't successful doing that. I don't want to make memory care sound awful because really it was a lifesaver, but that was just one experience of women showering men that I think needs to be addressed.
And it's really complicated. And that's one of the things that we, there are a lot of men, particularly men who were in the military, who were much more comfortable with men doing their care than women, because in the military, back when a lot of men were in the service, they had male corpsmen, a lot of military. So they were really used to being around men doing things. So that was really, some men are much more comfortable with women because women are seen as being the caregivers in a lot of families. So it's what works for one person. A lot of women prefer women to do their care, but there are some women I've found who really feel much more comfortable, safer with a man doing their care. So it's really individualizing and figure out what works for each person. I'm so glad you brought that up because that is a critical thing. And sometimes it's those little pieces that make a huge difference. So I want to show you, you reminded me of something that I wanted to show y'all this day. And so what I wanted to show y'all this day was we saw this photograph, these scans last month, and this is still early, but I want to use it in a different way. This part here, this frontal lobe, this alarm system, or this frontal lobe, this executive control, this logic and reason, and this amygdala, which is this alarm system, this emergency kind of thing. So what happens with this brain is logic and reason is running it. So when I broke my shoulder and I had to have some help, some people helped me in some ways that I was not really, it wouldn't have been my preference. I wasn't really comfortable, but it just kind of had to happen. I was able to shove down my reflexes and tolerate the care. But if I've got dementia and this logic and reason part of my brain isn't driving anymore, what's really driving is this reflex and this danger. It's not just aware, it's not just risky, it's right in there with danger. Then pushing away, this doesn't feel safe, this doesn't feel right, pushing away. Now, here's part of our challenge. a lot of us, when somebody pushes us, or somebody goes to hit us, or somebody goes to bite us, or someone yells at us, we have reflexive reactions, right? And we feel like, what would you call that person who's trying to hit you or strike out at you or trying to bite you? What if you're not looking at it from their perspective? If you're looking at it from your perspective, what would you call it? Aggressive is what somebody put down. So for people living with dementia, part of what we try to do is change our understanding of that, is from being aggressive to really that person is trying to protect him or herself. So your husband in that situation, Pat, that you described, he wasn't trying to hurt you, and you have that understanding. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He was trying to protect himself. Either way, when it's somebody you care about or somebody you're caring with or for, it's hard to get into those situations and feel like those kinds of things are happening, and it doesn't make sense. We don't understand it. So let's move back a little bit. We've talked about this. Dementia in the middle state creates this sense of distress and the world not being safe, because people are trying to, our brains, our human brains, crave the world to make sense. And so I'm trying to put pieces that don't fit together. And when it doesn't work, it gives a sense of distress and this sense of not feeling safe. So what people start to do is they respond to us with emotion and reflex and not logic and reason. So the connection is finding the way to help just enough. So what Pat was able to do with her husband was able to provide the right amount of support that her husband needed. So he might have needed, I mean, he was doing a good job. He needed her to provide the supplies. He couldn't go get the rinseless soap and go get the cloth, but he needed her to help him get in the right place at the right time, provide some support. Someone who didn't know or wasn't paying attention, instead of giving your husband, he only needed 3 fingers of help, that person went in there with 5 fingers of help and took over and started doing. And that can create that real challenge of distress, of it not being right, it feeling unsafe and dangerous. We're talking about people. Now, when we were talking about people last month or couple of weeks ago, we were talking about people in the early stages. Those are people who can do things okay for themselves for a while. Some of them are still living at home by themselves. Some of them are living with support. When we get into these middle stages, people really can't be on their own. So now we're not thinking about managing 8 hours of the day or 8 hours of the month or 16 hours of the day or 16 hours a month. We're thinking about managing 24 hours of the day, every day, day after day. So it really takes a team. And this kind of support can happen in a lot of different ways. Some people find that what works is bringing support into the home. Now, that sounds like, of course, everybody wants to be home. And of course, things are going to go better when you're home. And of course, things are, it just is the best. Thunderstorm. I actually had a lady that I was working with who hated having people in her home. She really, really hated having people in her home. And the reason she hated having people in her home is she had always been a very meticulous housekeeper. She had always made sure everything was exact. She was very precise. And could anybody come into her house and manage her house the way she managed her house? No. And so when they would run the dishwasher and the dishwasher wasn't full, she would get so angry. People would put things, they didn't fold the towels the way she folded them. She would get so angry and frustrated because she had the skills to know that it wasn't right because it wasn't familiar, but she didn't have the skills to be able to communicate. I prefer the towels to be folded this way. So she would just take them all out and throw them around because it didn't work. She was so miserable having people in her home. different things for different people. There are all kinds of options. There are options like adult day programs. Sometimes people need to live places that aren't their home. So there, sometimes people in certain situations in the middle of dementia can be okay with the right amount of support and independent living. That's probably very vulnerable and very risky. Got to be really careful about that. Assisted living or memory care or even skilled care facilities are where a lot of people receive their care, but even more of them receive it in their home. The challenge is, how do we make it work? Because if you think about a 24-hour day and you're a care partner, you've now got your 24-hour day and you've got the other person's 24-hour day. So now instead of managing a 24-hour day, you're now trying to manage a 48-hour day. And it really becomes too much. So in this middle part of dementia, we really have to look for, how do we make this system work with some help from outside? So that might be help in the home. It might be help outside of the home. It might be finding another way to create home. So let's go back and look at some of the questions that are about that. It's how do you pay for it? It can get really expensive. And so making those plans early on, making decisions early on for yourself, because if you've got somebody with dementia, you're not making plans and decisions for them that are going to help you wind up with a lot more money to pay for a lot more things, but making those decisions for yourself so you'll have ways to pay for things later on. Who makes the decisions? It gets so complicated because people make commitments and promises. And I might say, you know, I'll always take care of you at home. But when it gets to the point where that person's not sleeping, or it gets to that point that that person is leaving, that promise and that commitment might not work. And so we might have to figure out another way to create home in a place that isn't this building, but create home in a place that's another building. Who decides? Is it the person living with dementia? Yeah, they need to have some input into it. Not the where, but the what's important. What are we going to try first? And then once you decide we think we need to have people come in, which group do we try? And that's when I really recommend you reaching out to a group like Dementia Alliance of North Carolina, reaching out to support groups in your own community. If you're out of state or if you're out of the area, reaching out to those support groups, because they often are the people who know where do you go for the kinds of help and care that you might need at any time. Communication strategies, because that's really important. So I've got here, let go and go with the flow. So say that with me. Let go and go with the flow. So I'm going to bring Lisa into this one. And I'm going to have Lisa be my care partner. Now, Lisa is my care partner. I'm the person living with dementia. And what Lisa's going to try to do is let go and go with the flow. She's going to try to not use a whole bunch of words, because how many words do you think I'm processing? I'm not processing very many words. So she's going to try to let go of the truth, and she's going to try to let go of being right. And she's going to try to help meet my need with some of those things that we've talked about. Some of those things like some rhythm, or some of those things like repeating some of my words. So you ready, Lisa?
Sure, let's give it a go.
Hey, you girl.
Hey, Melanie.
Hey, girl.
Hey there, Melanie. How are you?
Hey, you don't, the one, where?
Are you looking for your baby?
So try fewer words. Oh, the baby.
Oh, the baby.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, the baby.
So Lisa hands me.
A baby.
Yep. Look.
Oh, look, the baby.
Yeah, it's the one that you got with the one.
Yay.
So what did y'all notice Lisa did? So drop it in the chat. What did she do really beautifully? You can unmute and tell her what she did beautifully, or you can drop it in the chat. Oh, so Marjorie wrote, the very first thing I see is she recognized the baby. So Lisa didn't go, what do you want? Well, tell me what you want. If you tell me what you want, I'll give you. Melanie, just tell me, I know you want something. Tell me what did you want? So she paid attention, not just to what I was saying, but to what?
Your movement,
What you were
your
doing.
arm.
What I was doing. And so I think we may have talked, or if you've been on some other things, that communication is more than just the words that we use. So I was showing her what I needed, and she went along with it. She went along with the baby, and she handed me a doll. Now, I need to be really clear about dolls. I'm a big fan of dolls that look like babies, that are weighted like babies, for people who have done what? Spent a lot of time with babies. So be honest with me. And those of you who don't have cameras, you can be honest with me too by putting a thumbs up. Be honest with me. How many of y'all really like babies? Okay, so Holly says yes, and Margie and Beth says yes. There are a couple of people who really like babies. So Susan really likes babies. Jody's saying, okay, I'll take a baby. How many of y'all really don't like babies? I don't like babies. I loved my son, but I don't like babies very much. What? And Pat, you're kind of doing, are you not a big baby person either? Can you unmute?
Yeah, no.
Don't have to examine, just don't like babies. We got it. Yeah, so I'm not a big.
I'm trying to like a great grandchild. Unfortunately, she's far away. So she pushes me away, and I have to just look at her and let her get used to me. She's not a cuddler.
And some babies don't like people. So I'm not a big baby person. So if you were to hand me a baby would be kind of what? Kind of be work for me. It's not fun, it's work. So if I need to work, I'm good with babies. I'm very good with babies. Everybody kind of do this, kind of hold your baby and kind of bounce. I'm really good with babies. I'm very good with babies because I'm a rhythmical person, and babies like rhythm. So I'm very good with babies. I can do all of this. I can put babies to sleep. I'm really good with them, but it's work. It's not fun for me. So
I did, though, get my husband a bear. Shortly, Big Bear, was it for Toys R Us or something? And I wrote his name on the foot of the bear. And he wanted that bear in a certain chair. So it was important. He didn't hold it or play with it, but boy, he knew that was his.
He knew it was his. And I was going to show you, but I didn't ask my friend if I could show you, so I decided not to. A friend of mine's mother had dementia, and she got her a dog. And so this dog would bark, and this dog would open its mouth, and she would feed the dog, and we'd have to clean the nasty crap out of the dog's mouth. But it was wonderful and worth it, because that gave her a sense of being, of taking care of something, of providing care. And it was really, really beautiful. So Melissa says, has one, and loves it. It gives people purpose. I think, so Melissa, can you unmute for a minute? You've had good experience with the dog?
Absolutely. So my dad had a little dog that had gotten cancer and had passed away this year. And her name was Nikki, and he was used to Nikki being with him all day. So we got him one of the dogs from Joy for All Pet Companions. And so you can turn it on, you can mute it, you can turn it off. We leave her on, and he puts his hands around her. I have to wrap it up in a baby blanket every night. He wants to make sure that it's warm. He talks to her all day. I wrote on a whiteboard on his wall, my dog's name is Pumpkin. So everybody calls her Pumpkin, and we refer to how is Pumpkin doing? And he'll say, where is Pumpkin? She's in your chair. When he rubs her, you can feel her heartbeat. when he makes a notion, he loves to watch cowboy movies. So when the cowboys are interacting on the TV, she'll start barking and he'll say, do you see them horses? Do you see them cows? And he literally interacts with this dog all day. My brother, it was very hard in the beginning for them to make, because I just went along just like when I was raising my children, and we pretended play when they were little boys, and whatever they wanted to play, cops and robbers, whatever it is, cooking in the kitchen, you just pretend. And I told my brother, I said, you got to pretend, just go along with it, make sure think it's real. Well, now we're having to stay with my dad at night, and my brother takes him every other night to his home. Pumpkin goes, the baby goes, Pumpkin stays in the seat. We communicate just like if it was a live dog. When people come in to visit him, he immediately wants to recognize Pumpkin and says, hey, have you seen my dog? She likes to sit beside me. She bumps me all night to make sure I'm still beside of her. In his mind, that's what she does. I 100%, I couldn't be a spokesperson for Joy for All Pet Companions, because they either will like it and accept it or they won't. And he immediately attached to it. I keep rechargeable batteries. His neighbor is awesome. And she'll come in and she'll say, oh, Pumpkin's not barking today. I'm going to take her to Jill and we're going to see, get her to the vet and see what's going on to see why she's not barking. They'll change the batteries, bring her right on back. She'll start barking and he never knows. Like she'll say, look who I found messing with my cats in the yard. And he'll say, I didn't know how she got out. And he never, it does not recollect to him that she's a pet and that it's an artificial toy animal.
And so that's a beautiful story and a beautiful recommendation. I've used cats, I've used dogs, I've used babies. I've never used Barbies.
Yeah, no.
Because what is happening with a doll that's like a doll or a dog or a cat is a very adult process of providing care. And that is a preserved ability. So that preserved need of providing care, of having some work to do, whether it's providing care or whether it's something else. People need to have a sense of purpose and need to feel like they're contributing and need to feel like they're making a difference. So this communication stuff, we've got some things up there. Lisa was using fewer words, using my words, kind of using some gestures to support me. And she was thinking about it from my perspective. What did I need? Yes.
Melanie,
Yeah.
this is Lisa. We only have a few minutes left.
I know.
So I want to make sure we leave some time for questions if we can.
Okay. So we'll have a couple of minutes of questions. This is just this idea that the environment and our care partners and ourselves, the person living with dementia, all kind of interact. And you can read this. I'll have this in the PowerPoint. And it's what kinds of things to check when things aren't going well. I did want to mention this one thing, which is we talk a lot about the things we can't change. Some of the things we can change are the chemicals in the person's brain and the chemicals in our brain. And we do that by taking care of ourselves. Now, caregivers often don't take very good care of themselves. Caregivers often put themselves on the back burner. And there's this idea that self-care is selfish. But the reality is, the better you take care of yourself, the better a care partner you can be. The better you take care of yourself, the more energy you've got, the more creativity you've got, the more flexibility you've got to be able to do the important job of being a care partner. So I am gonna take a moment for questions, since I could talk forever. We've got 4 minutes left. So what are some of your questions about kind of this middle part of dementia?
I want to put a plug in for daycare programs. After my husband died, I went and spent a whole day because I hadn't been a helicopter person. And where he was losing his roles here at home from being a good cook to not being, they told me, because he was strong and healthy, all the roles that he assumed. So he had leadership roles at Charles House. He also painted. I'm an artist. He would never have painted for me, but he wanted to please the people. So I think that he stayed middle stages a lot longer because of the daycare program.
I also am a big proponent of adult day health and adult day programs. They can be a really wonderful and the best kind of care is the care that's supportive of the person living with dementia and the care partner. So it's not like for your husband, it was good for him to be there and good for you for him to be there.
Well, and I knew he was safe, but I had a couple of hours, a couple of days a week to myself.
And you could be a better care partner because of that time and place. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. What other comments, questions? Got a minute or two left. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and just unmute and say what you're going to take away from this session, what you're going to try or what you've learned. If you can't unmute, if you want to drop it in the chat, what have you learned? What are you going to try after having spent this precious hour together? What are you going to learn? What are you going to try, or what are you going to, or what did you learn?
I can see people typing.
Yeah, keep things simple and go with the flow. Thank you for putting that in, Jody. It takes a while for things to get through sometimes. Simplifying as the disease progresses. So that idea of putting your fingers up, matching 3 with 3, matching 2 with 2. So matching expectations and skills so it goes better.
Just want to say thank
That
you,
idea,
Melanie.
yes.
This is Gail. Thank you, thank you, thank
Gail.
you. And whoever that lady was that lauded adult day programs, and you, thank you so much. They're amazing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Yeah. Simplifying, I see, slowing down and not taking over. So supporting preserve skill, matching abilities, yay, and identifying and then supporting preserve strength. So we've had a great time together. Thank you for talking with me, for interacting with me. Thank you for the ideas and the feedback and the comments that you've had. I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and I hope to see you all when we get together. It's coming up pretty soon. When is our next one, Lisa?
Our next one is next week.
You want me to know that, don't you?
I do. So in 1 week from today, we will get back together and we will talk about the later stages of dementia and more as people need more assistance and help and are really reliant on these caregivers that are joining us. So we want to thank everybody for coming today, and you will receive a link to the recording of this along with Melanie's full PowerPoint slides. If you have any questions about this material, about our first session or our next session, please feel free to email your questions. And again, we want to thank our sponsors, Eastside, Aware Senior Care, and Capital Financial Solutions. Thank all of you, and especially again, thank you so much, Melanie, for your time and your expertise. And be safe on this rainy day, and we will see you all again next week. Thanks so much.